Most people who open a sports outlet don't fail because they don't work hard enough. They fail because nobody told them what the business actually is before they signed the lease. They walked in loving sport, loving the idea of selling the things they grew up using, and they confused passion for preparation. Those are two completely different things, and the business will make the distinction clear faster than you expect. 1. The startup costs are larger than you think. You picture the shop, the clean shelving, the shoes on display, the jerseys under good lighting. You see the version of the store you want to walk into, and you start building toward that image. You don't picture the number that gets you there, because nobody made you run the number before you got excited. Fit-out costs for a modest retail space run between $15,000 and $40,000 before a single product arrives. Add your opening inventory, which for a sports outlet covering multiple categories runs another $30,000 to $70,000, depending on your suppliers, your range, and how much product you need on the floor to not look like an empty shell on day one. Then your point of sale system, your security cameras, your signage, your first and last month of rent deposit, your business registration and legal fees, your public liability insurance, your workers' compensation, your staff training hours before the doors open, and the 2 or 3 weeks of dead time between your fit-out finishing and your first actual trading day. Most independent sports stores open with somewhere between $80,000 and $150,000 spent before day one of trading.
Experienced retailers will tell you most first-time owners budget for about half that and spend the other half in panic during the first 6 months, raiding savings they thought were a buffer and drawing on credit they thought was emergency only. The store looks great on opening day. The bank account already has a different story running underneath it. 2. Your margins are thinner than almost any other retail category. You sell a pair of running shoes for $120. The brand sold them to you for $65. Your gross margin on that transaction is roughly 46%, which sounds healthy until you subtract rent, staff wages, utilities, merchant fees, shrinkage, returns, and the cost of the units that didn't sell at full price and had to be marked down at end of season. What arrives in your account at the end of the month on that shoe sale is closer to $4 or $5 of actual profit. Sporting goods retail runs net margins of 2 to 5% in a good year for an independent operator. That means on $1 million of annual revenue, you are clearing $20,000 to $50,000 of profit after costs. That is the number after you have personally worked 60 hours a week, handled deliveries, managed staff rosters, dealt with supplier disputes, and done the end-of-day cash reconciliation yourself because you can't yet afford someone else to do it reliably. Industry veterans who have run these stores for decades will tell you the margins were already thin 10 years ago, and they have only compressed further since as online competition increased and brands gained more direct channel power. You are not running a business with pricing power. The brands set the floor with their recommended retail prices. The online competitors and the brand's own website set the ceiling on what customers are willing to pay in your store. You operate in the gap between them, and you have very little control over either side of that gap. 3. The inventory trap will bear you if you are not careful about it from week 1. Retail is a cash flow game, not a revenue game, and most first-time owners don't understand that distinction until it is actively hurting them. You buy the stock before you sell it, which means your money is sitting on shelves waiting to be converted back into cash, and the longer it sits there unsold, the more damage it does to the rest of your operation. A sports outlet carries seasonal inventory across multiple categories, which means you will be committing cash to winter stock in July before you know whether your summer season recovered the money you spent in February. The mistake most owners make in their first 2 years is over-ordering the exciting products and under-ordering the basics. They fill the store with new release colorways and limited editions that look great in the display and move slowly off the floor, while the everyday training gear and basic socks and standard balls that actually turn over weekly run out by Wednesday and take 10 days to restock. Dead stock is the silent killer. A rack of waterproof jackets that didn't sell through winter sits there tying up $3,000 to $5,000 of your capital
until you mark down 40% to clear it, taking a loss on product you already paid for months ago. Retailers who survived long enough to have genuine perspective will tell you that buying discipline, knowing what not to order as clearly as you know what to order, is the single most important operational skill in this business. More important than your sales conversion rate, more important than your marketing spend, more important than your store location. Because the wrong inventory strategy will drain your cash faster than a bad month of trading ever could.
4. Seasonality will define your entire financial year, whether you plan for it or not. A sports outlet does not trade evenly across 12 months, and any projection that assumes it does is a projection built on wishful thinking. It spikes and it craters, and if you are not financially structured for the craters in advance, the spikes become irrelevant because you won't have the cash to stock them properly. Back to school in late summer is a reliable peak. The lead up to winter sports seasons is a peak. The Christmas gifting period is your biggest peak. Everything in between is variable to slow depending on your category mix and your local demographic. January after Christmas is genuinely brutal for most independent sports retailers. The customers spent in December. The returns and exchanges are flowing back in, the staff hours are still running, and the next seasonal buying rush is still 4 to 6 weeks away with no revenue to fund it. Business owners who have run sports retail through multiple years will tell you the first year's slow periods feel like the business is failing, and it creates a specific kind of panic that causes bad decisions.
Discounting aggressively to generate cash in a slow month? Over-ordering when the next peak arrives because the previous slow period felt so desperate? Getting the lease on a second location during a peak month because the first one finally felt like it was working? The stores that survive these patterns are the ones that learn to run lean through the troughs and stock precisely and aggressively for the peaks, with cash reserves specifically set aside in good months to cover the bad ones.
5. Rent will be your most dangerous fixed cost and the one you have the least ability to renegotiate once you have committed to it. You need foot traffic to make a sports outlet viable, which means you need to be in a location where people already move in volume, which means you are competing for the same commercial leases as every other retailer who has done the same analysis and reached the same conclusion. A high-traffic shopping strip or center charges premium rent precisely because everyone wants to be there. That rent does not reduce when your sales are down. It does not adjust to your quarterly performance or your personal circumstances. It arrives as a fixed obligation on the same date every month, regardless of whether your biggest supplier just changed their terms, your best staff member just quit, or there's a public works project outside your door blocking foot traffic for 3 months. Experienced commercial tenants and retail property consultants will tell you to treat rent-to-revenue ratio as a hard filter before you even negotiate on anything else, and to never let rent exceed 10 to 12% of your projected annual revenue in a realistic trading scenario, not your optimistic scenario, your realistic one. Most first-time sports store owners end up paying 14 to 18% of revenue in rent because the location felt exactly right and they didn't run the conservative projection before signing a 3 or 5 year lease with personal guarantee clauses they didn't fully read.
6. The internet has already changed what your customer knows before they walk through your door. 10 years ago, a customer came into a sports store to discover what existed. Today, they arrive having already watched 3 YouTube reviews, read the Reddit thread, checked the brand's website, compared prices across 4 retailers, and confirmed that the product they want is available online for less than your floor price with free shipping. Nike. Nike operates its own flagship digital storefront. Adidas prioritizes its own channel. Under Armour, New Balance, and most mid-tier sporting brands now run direct-to-consumer operations that compete against the very stores stocking their product on your shelves. You are buying their inventory, carrying their storage and shrinkage risk, employing staff to explain their technology and fit their shoes, and then at the moment of conversion, you are competing against the brand's own website, where the customer already has an account saved. Industry retailers who have navigated this shift will tell you the brands are no longer your partners.
in the way the word used to mean.
They are your suppliers and your direct competitors operating in the same customer's purchase journey at the same time. The independent stores that are still growing in this environment have made deliberate moves towards brands and product categories that either don't have strong direct channels, value the independent retail relationship genuinely, or produce product that requires in-person expertise to sell correctly. Things the internet cannot replicate with a product description page. 7. Niche is the only durable competitive advantage a genuinely independent sports store retains. The broad sports store model, something for every sport, every age group, every budget under one roof, is the model that large national chains with enormous buying power and online platforms with unlimited virtual shelf space have already won decisively. You cannot compete with them on range because they will always carry more. You cannot compete on price because their volume gives them terms you will never get. You cannot compete on convenience because they have apps and next-day delivery. What you can potentially compete on is depth, knowledge, community trust, and the specific expertise that only comes from operators who live inside the sport they are selling to. The sports retail businesses that are gaining ground right now are universally the ones that went deep on one sport, one demographic, or one performance category instead of spreading themselves across everything.
A store dedicated entirely to running, staffed exclusively by people who train seriously, run local events, host shoe fittings, offer gait analysis, and know every customer's weekly mileage by name. That store builds a customer relationship that Amazon cannot replicate. A store that carries every sport shallowly builds a customer who checks their price on a phone screen before they reach the counter. Retailers who made it past a decade in independent sports retail will tell you that the day they narrowed their focus felt like they were giving up. It was actually the first day the business had a reason to exist that couldn't be easily replaced.
8. Staff are the margin line you are probably underestimating because the cost of getting it wrong is invisible until it has already compounded. A genuinely knowledgeable staff member in a sports outlet is your most powerful conversion tool, your most effective marketing channel, and your highest controllable variable cost all at once. Getting the incentive structure right is one of the most consequential decisions you will make as an operator. Flat wage structures keep your payroll line predictable on paper and remove any sales pressure that makes customers uncomfortable, but they also remove the direct incentive that separates an employee who helps a customer find something from an employee who helps a customer find the exact right thing and adds 3 accessories to the basket. Commission structures create energy and personal investment in the sales result, but they create pressure dynamics that sophisticated customers read immediately and that erode the trust that makes a specialty store worth visiting in the first place.
The calculus is genuinely difficult, and the right answer varies by store culture and customer type. Retail operators who have managed sports store teams through multiple hiring cycles will tell you the quality of the individual hire matters more here than almost any other retail format, because the customer standing in front of your staff member is often making a $200 decision they feel uncertain about, and they are watching the staff member's face to decide whether to trust the recommendation or just go home and order it online. A bad hire in that moment doesn't just cost one sale. It costs the customer's confidence in the store permanently, and they don't tell you it happened.
9. The exit is harder than the entry, and most operators don't find that out until they are already inside it, trying to leave. You opened the store because you loved sport, and you wanted to own something that felt meaningful. 5 years in, if the market has shifted, or the body has worn down, or the margins have compressed enough that the 60-hour weeks no longer make financial sense, you will go looking for the exit and discover that a retail business sitting on a fixed lease with thin documented margins and seasonally locked inventory is a difficult thing to value cleanly and a difficult thing to transfer to a buyer who can see exactly what the numbers say. Buyers at this end of the market want to see consistent, provable net profit.
Thin margin retail with owner wages blended into the accounts and peak season timing dependencies rarely produces the kind of clean, consistent profit history that attracts a serious buyer at a meaningful multiple. The lease transfer requires landlord consent, which the landlord is under no obligation to provide on favorable terms.
The inventory needs to be independently counted and fairly valued, which is a negotiation in itself. Most independent sports retailers who eventually sell either sell for materially less than they believed the business was worth when they started it, or they close the doors and liquidate the stock because the math on a formal sale doesn't justify the process. Retail business brokers who deal in this category regularly will tell you the single most common mistake they see is owners who never thought about the exit until they were ready to leave. And by that point, the lease structure, the accounting presentation, and the business documentation that would have made it saleable were already locked in the form they were created in year one, when nobody was thinking about them at all. 10. The numbers most people track are not the numbers that actually run the business. Revenue is the vanity metric of retail. It is the number on the summary screen, the number you quote when someone asks how the star is going, the number that feels like evidence things are working. It is not the number that determines whether the business survives or fails. The number that determines that is your cash conversion cycle. How many days pass between the moment you spend money on inventory and the moment that inventory converts back into usable cash in your operating account? A shorter cycle means your capital is working efficiently and the business has room to breathe. A longer cycle means pressure is building somewhere in the system, regardless of how strong the sales line looks. Accountants who work specifically in retail will tell you that the majority of small retail businesses that fail are not losing money on paper in their final 12 months of trading. They are running out of working capital while technically recording a profit because the cash is tied up in stock ordered 3 months ago that hasn't moved yet, and in supplier invoices still sitting unpaid, and in the gap between what the peak season spent and what the slow season is bringing back in. Revenue tells you how much business you're doing. Cash flow tells you whether you can actually pay for next month's stock order, next week's wages, and next month's rent at the same time. The business is real. The opportunity is real. The margins are thin. The rent is fixed. The customers are informed, and the brands you stock are competing against you using the very product you bought from them. What survives in this environment is the operator who understood all of that clearly before they signed anything and deliberately built a business model designed for the version of sports retail that actually exists today. Not the version that existed 10 years ago, and certainly not the version that seemed obvious when the idea first felt exciting. If you are going to open one anyway, open it knowing exactly which game you are playing, because the operators who are still standing are the ones who never confused loving sport with understanding the economics of selling it.